Welcome to Auto Mundial, the weekly car news and review show where this week we take a look at a 1,000 horsepower EV from America.
We also have a new version of the Citron C3 and the latest SUV from Cupra.
Plus Hyundai's hot Kona squares up against the Ford Puma and the all-new Subaru WRX. Is it still a rally car for the road? Find out later on, but up first, the news.
A 1911 Rolls-Royce has recreated its record-breaking drive from London to Edinburgh. 2021 marks 110 years since the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost completed a 799-mile return run from London to Edinburgh at an average speed of 20 miles per hour. It was the first Rolls-Royce to exceed 100 miles per hour, and as a celebration of its success, it's just retraced its steps from London to Edinburgh once again. Travelling with 9 other Ghosts of the same era and a brand new one, the cars set off from the Royal Automobile Club in London and arrived at Rolls-Royce Motor Cars of Edinburgh a day later. The route followed as closely as possible the original from 1911 along the Great North Road, with the Silver Ghost locked in top gear just as it was on the original record-breaking run.
While almost all big manufacturers are now on board with electric cars, there are still plenty of new EV startups hoping to cash in on the electric car revolution. This is the Lucid Air, a 1,065 brake horsepower saloon car from one such startup hoping to take on the giants of the industry. Based in California, Lucid is hoping to follow in Elon Musk's footprints with its new performance saloon. As you'd expect from something over 1,000 horsepower, the Air is really quite fast. Top speed is set to be 235 miles per hour, with a 0 to 60 sprint dealt with in just 2.5 seconds. Lucid even reckons that the Air will do the standing quarter mile in 9.9 seconds, making this the first production EV to do so in under 10. Clearly, Lucid is keen to make an impression with its first ever car, and the claims don't stop there. The American marque says that the Air is the most aerodynamic luxury car in the world, and it can recuperate 300 miles of charge in just 20 minutes. If you don't need 1,000 horsepower though, there are some more down-to-earth models available. The selection of 4 trim levels kicks off at $52,100, including the US EV tax credit. For that, you get 240 miles of range and a single electric motor, sending 395 brake horsepower to the rear wheels. Next up are the 612 brake horsepower Touring and the 789 brake horsepower Grand Touring models, which cost $87,000 and $131,000 respectively, and can achieve an enormously impressive 512 miles on a charge. The top spec 235 miles per hour car is known as the Dream Edition, and adds an extra $30,000 on top of the Grand Touring. As well as the extra performance, it also gets some bespoke interior trim and a unique set of 21-inch wheels. As modern as it looks, we can't say it's a particularly pretty car, especially when compared to rivals from Audi and Porsche. But if Lucid can pull it off, when it enters production in Arizona next year, we think Tesla should be very worried indeed.
The Hyundai Kona isn't really the sort of car that lights a fire in the hearts of petrol heads. It's a small, economical crossover SUV for driving about town with its lofty driving position and stylish cabin. There's even an electric one with an excellent range and impressively competitive price tag. Now, though, it seems Hyundai has gone a bit mad. This is the new Kona N, a crossover for petrolheads. And while that may seem like a bit of an oxymoron, Hyundai insists that this is every bit the performance car. It gets some mean-looking exhausts at the back, a chunky spoiler, and plenty of red bits reminding you you're in something sporty. Inside, it gets the familiar N steering wheel with driving mode buttons and some body-hugging sports seats to keep you in place as you explore the limits of the crossover SUV grid. Following on from the brilliant i30 and i20 N models, the Kona N has a reputation to uphold. Targeting the likes of the Ford Puma ST and Volkswagen Tiguan R, it's basically a hot hatchback on stilts. And while on paper this may not sound all that enthralling to keen drivers, hear it out, as under the bonnet you'll find a turbocharged 2-litre engine pumping out a meaty 286 brake horsepower. Under the skin, the Kona N gets an electronic limited slip differential, quick ratio steering and active dampers from an i30N which have been tuned to cope with the extra ride height and weight. However, this isn't the only crossover aimed at driving enthusiasts, and our current favourite will take some beating.
This is the new Ford Puma ST, and straight from the off things look promising. It shares most of its underpinnings with one of our favourite hot hatches, the brilliant Fiesta ST. It gets the same 197 brake horsepower 3-cylinder 1.5, not much by the standards of some fast SUVs, but it should be enough to raise a smile or two. Drive is sent to the front wheels only via a 6-speed manual transmission, making this more of a high-riding hot hatch than an SUV. The chassis also borrows lots of bits from the Fiesta. The whole car has been stiffened up while the standard Puma's brakes have been upgraded, and the steering rack is 25% quicker. There's also an optional limited slip diff working alongside a torque vectoring system to help pull the car around corners and eliminate understeer. Of course, this being a bigger car than the Fiesta and 100 kilos heavier, it isn't quite as fast. It's not bad though, hitting 62 miles per hour from a standstill in 6.7 seconds, 2/10 behind its smaller sibling. And of course, the Puma ST has had a sporty makeover. There's a new front splitter adding 80% more downforce, and a rear wing and diffuser at the back, which we suspect aren't quite so effective. They look cool though, giving the car a much more purposeful look. The interior has also been updated with various bits of sporty trim and ST badges dotted around. The excellent infotainment from the regular Puma is present and correct too, completing the ST's everyday appeal.
While the Hyundai may be faster, the character and dynamics of the Ford are very desirable. Of course, though, neither is as appealing as the hot hatches they're based on.
While we're familiar with the Citron C3 here in Europe, the French brand has been busy building an all-new one for Indian and South American markets, and here it is. Still called the C3, it's not to be confused with the European model. The first of 3 so-called internationally orientated models, the new C3 and its upcoming siblings are to be designed, developed and made in the markets they'll be sold in. It's smaller than the European model, but it sits higher to soak up rougher roads. The whole car looks more upright too, and a bit less curvy. It does carry Citroen's current design language though, with its unique front lights and brightly coloured trim accents. It may have a smaller footprint than a Ford Fiesta, but Citroen is adamant that there's room for 5 adults on board, with decent leg and headroom throughout. There's lots of storage and cargo space too, as well as a smart infotainment system with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Prices and engine specs haven't been released yet, but we imagine the power will be low and the price even lower.
Join us again after the break as the new Subaru WRX faces the Volkswagen Golf R.
Still to come, an all-new Subaru, but first...
Since the Volkswagen Group bought SEAT in 1986, the Spanish brand has consistently produced cheaper, stylish versions of BMW products. Often available with less equipment to keep the prices down, the gap between SEAT and Volkswagen has been getting narrower for years now. And while SEAT has long built Golf GTI rivaling hot hatchbacks, it's now turning its hand to performance SUVs. This is the new Cupra Formenta, and immediately you'll notice there aren't any SEAT badges. That's because Cupra, the old name for fast SEATs, is now a brand in its own right, with bronze badging and lots of matte grey paintwork. Following on from its reworked Ateca, the Formenta is the sub-brand's first unique model. Marketed as a coupe SUV, it's longer and lower than the Ateca, with the familiar bronze accents and big wheels. It's a handsome car, as it should be, with a starting price of around £40,000 for the top spec models. There's a host of cheaper, slower options though, and even a plug-in hybrid. For now though, we'll concentrate on the full-fat 306 brake horsepower 2-litre turbo model. Power is sent to all 4 wheels via a 7-speed DSG transmission. The result is some impressive performance figures. 0 to 62 takes just 4.9 seconds, while top speed is limited to 155. Inside, all trim levels come with digital instruments and a massive 12-inch central touchscreen, complete with Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay. The angular design of the exterior is continued inside, with more copper-coloured detailing and a lack of physical buttons, with many of the controls being operated via the infotainment screen. Despite its coupe-ish design, the Formenta is practical, with decent passenger space and a 420-litre boot. But in this class, cargo space plays second fiddle to snob value.
And if having a car with a premium image is important to you, look no further than this, the BMW X2 M35i. With some M Division chassis tweaks and a 302 brake horsepower 2-litre engine, the X2 matches the Cupra from 0 to 62, but does so with that all-important BMW badge on the nose. It's slightly smaller than the Formentor and not quite as good looking, with a somewhat dated cabin, albeit one that's easier to use. It is only £2,000 more than the Cupra though, something that will no doubt win image-conscious buyers. So how about the Cupra's VW Group stablemates, the Audi SQ2 and the Volkswagen Tiguan R? Well, starting with the Audi, it makes do with slightly less power, 297 bhp, but beats both the BMW and the Cupra to 62 by a tenth of a second. That rapid acceleration is matched by its impressive torque delivery, pulling hard throughout the rev range. However, its small size and relatively low ride height do make us wonder why you wouldn't just save some money and buy a lighter, faster S3 instead. So, what about the Tiguan R? A proper SUV with plenty of space, the Tiguan R uses the same 2-litre motor as the Cupra and the Audi, this time tuned up to 316 bhp. Performance figures are identical to the Cupra's due to its extra bulk, but despite their similarities, this is a very different car. It makes do without the edgy styling, bronze trim and matte paint, instead quietly sporting some normal chrome badges and an all-round more sensible look. It's a lot more subtle for those who like their fast SUVs to fly under the radar. The interior is much more conventional too, with lots of buttons and hard-wearing plastics.
The Cupra and the VW are our two favourites in this class, but both for different reasons. While their on-paper performance may be identical, the outlandish styling of the Formenta and the more reserved image of the Volkswagen each appeal to different sides of our personalities.
The Subaru WRX may have been absent on UK shores for a few years now, but over in America, the familiar recipe of big power in a turbocharged compact saloon car is still going strong. Subaru's rallying days might be behind them, but that hasn't stopped them from building this, the all-new 2022 WRX. On the face of it, nothing seems to have changed too drastically. It's still not especially good looking, but has a muscular look thanks to its bold wheel arches and signature bonnet scoop. It does look more modern than the outgoing 4th generation car, although we're not quite sold on the rear end, where you find 4 exhaust tips poking out of a sea of black plastic cladding. And we know that big wings are usually reserved for WRX STIs, but even so, the one on this new car does seem remarkably subtle. However, Subaru has always put substance over style, so it's what's underneath that really counts. As always, the new WRX features a turbocharged boxer engine with displacement now up from 2 litres to 2.4. Power is up at 267 brake horsepower and, best of all, it's all hooked up to a manual 6-speed gearbox. You can pay extra for an automatic if you wish, but all versions are still all-wheel drive. To use the old cliché, it seems as if this is still very much a rally car for the road. But it isn't just the engine that's been upgraded. Subaru has been busy improving the torsional rigidity, which is now up by 28%. The suspension has been beefed up too, with increased travel and 75% stiffer struts, all designed to improve performance over rough surfaces. Other chassis features include adaptive dampers, ventilated brakes and a limited slip differential to help you out when you find yourself going sideways. Power is automatically sent to whichever wheel needs it, and there's a host of very clever configurable driving modes which can be selected through the infotainment screen. High-spec GT models come with an enormous 11.6-inch portrait touchscreen, while base-spec cars come with 2 smaller screens divided through the middle. If we're honest, both are decent systems and the entry-level car seems to be the one to go for.
However, the WRX doesn't have the market all to itself. Sure, there isn't a Mitsubishi Evo to trouble it these days, but there is this, the Mark 8 Volkswagen Golf R. Subaru is yet to reveal the WRX's 0-62 time, but it'll do well to beat the Golf at 4.7 seconds. Powering the Hyper Hatch is a turbocharged 2-litre motor found in various VW Group products, this time producing a meaty 316 bhp. Naturally, the chassis had some upgrades too, with stiffer adaptive dampers, a new progressive power steering system, bigger brakes and wider tyres. It's lower too, but it's not just been the hardware that's been altered. The traction and stability control systems have also been tweaked. And there's a fancy new torque vectoring system that can split power between the front and rear axles and even between the two rear wheels for maximum grip on even the slippiest of surfaces.
The spec sheets are fairly even then, but we hope buyers continue to see the appeal of the WRX. In the UK, Subaru has said that fast Imprezas and WRXs are history, and nothing to do with the Subaru brand today. To that we say, nonsense. And we can but hope to see a new WRX on European roads in the future.
Join us again next week on Auto Mundial as we take a look at a new hybrid Bentley.